Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the Tabe Burka wash processed Ethiopia from Substance Cafe. And there's the bag right there. And Substance, based out of Paris, France. And they're a coffee roaster that's appeared on this channel on numerous occasions, and there's a little bit of a backstory behind this coffee, as we were having a meeting with Airworks and we essentially asked them if they had any coffees to sell us, as sometimes when we are meeting with them and we are running low on coffees, we see if there's just anything that we can add to an order, and Airworks happened to have this bag available, and they mentioned that it had been pretty well rested, and that was a very appealing prospect to us given that we usually do start our Substance coffees around the day 30 mark. So given that this coffee was twice as rested, it was going to be very interesting to see if that did contribute to the way that this coffee did turn out. So I'm definitely looking forward to discussing that, as this right here is actually day 79. And recipe we went with for this coffee was actually a higher extraction one, at a 17:1 water to coffee ratio, brewed at 99 degrees Celsius, about 210 degrees Fahrenheit. And I like this one best through the V60, which does indicate a more medium fine grind. However, we also went a bit more fine on the grind as well. Now, roast profile for this coffee, Substance is notorious for being one of the lightest roasting coffee roasters in the world. That is one of the main reasons why we wanted to pick up one of their coffees that had been significantly rested. And this coffee was certainly no exception to that, as this one definitely does skew on the ultra light side of things, as it is a very light coffee by most standards and metrics. With all that out of the way, let's go and start discussing this coffee. Day 59, first impression. So we started it almost immediately after we received it, and the coffee's off to a very nice start. It definitely felt like having this coffee be as rested as it was seemed to pay off very well, translating into the intensity, as it does have plenty of citric characteristics to it in a lemon-like sense, a bit of sweetness, but it certainly wasn't the focus, as there is a fair bit of a lighter florality to it, which I felt like was probably the primary focus to accompany the citric characteristics of it. So it was pretty straightforward for a washed Ethiopian coffee, but even then I was quite happy, because a lot of really light profiled washed Ethiopian coffees can be a little bit tame and bland, but given that this one had plenty of intensity, I felt like this would make for a fun review. We have a coffee that is adequately rested as opposed to the ones that we probably finish long before they should be completed. Day 61 through the Chemex. The coffee is a little bit better today, as it's offering a better intensity with a little bit more of an Earl Grey-like feel, and primarily a citric forward experience once again. Additionally, some subtle stone fruit characteristics with an apricot-like quality, but for the most part the coffee has been pretty straightforward yet again. Again, a little bit more intense than I might have expected for a coffee like this, especially if we would have started it around the day 30 mark. So we will continue on to day 63. We opted for the UFO brewer, and the coffee is very straightforward yet again, as it's continuing to offer more of those Earl Grey-like qualities to it, with a bit of the listed honey characteristics as well. As at least I do believe that they had a honey note listed on this one. Coffee is essentially what you'd expect for a light profiled washed Ethiopian coffee in terms of the delicacy and citric characteristics, with just a touch more intensity. Pretty solid overall. Really enjoyed the first 3 days we experienced on this one. Day 65 through the V60 with Substance's recipe, which is a 16.67:1 at 91 Celsius. I believe that's 195 Fahrenheit. And the coffee's a little bit better, as it has been pretty consistent so far, but this did give it a little bit more cleanliness and an almost Panamanian geisha-like florality, given just how clean the base of this one was, as there's still plenty of lighter floral characteristics, but they're a bit better defined. And a lot of people have asked why a lot of these ultralight coffee roasters do suggest lower temperatures, and it's because they want the profile to be a bit more clean, so they don't want a lot of the, I want to say, negative characteristics extracted out from a coffee. So that seemed to translate well based off of this experience, but we'll go ahead and move on to day 67, as we opted for the Chemex with the same adjustments, and it's still performing well, as there isn't anything particularly unique, at least in terms of this day. Nice level of sweetness and intensity, a little bit more sugariness this time around, and some subtle stone fruits to accompany the lighter floral qualities to it. But on day 70, that's when a lot of things would change, as we opted for those higher extraction adjustments to 17:1 at 99 Celsius. And the coffee is back to being spectacular, as it's weirdly Panamanian geisha-like, leading to the notion that it's likely the best through this brew method, as it's exceptionally clean and floral yet again with plenty of sweetness and intensity. And an anecdote about this day, I actually brewed this coffee before taking a trip down to Portland, so I put it in my canister, and I was sipping on this coffee from my drive down to Portland from Seattle, and I was just really impressed by the way that this coffee turned out, and I feel like it tainted any of the coffees that I had in Portland because it was just that much better than anything I experienced on that entire trip. So credits to how good this coffee was on this day. I cannot explain just how wonderfully clean it was. Day 73 through the Chemex with the same adjustments, and it still offers a lot of the really clean qualities, as it's the best it's been through this brew method. There is a slight preference towards the V60 as it's just a little bit less intense in comparison, but the cleanliness is still extremely high. It's still very floral, still very citric forward. So yeah, we'll go ahead and move on to the final notes. We have day 75 through the V60 with the higher extraction adjustments. And the coffee is excellent again, but maybe not quite as impressive as that day 70 mark, as there's a little bit more of a focus on the citric lemon characteristics. Very bright with less of the cleaner, well-defined florality, but some complementary stone fruits and tea-like savoriness to go with it, but a bit more primarily citric forward, which was a little bit of a shame given that some of the days we were experiencing with this coffee had a very heightened floral characteristic to it, which it's still there, but I obviously would prefer a floral quality to a citric quality. All right, so let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we're getting. And we have 2 level 5s, which is very rare for a washed Ethiopian coffee, but let's go through those. We will start with the cleanliness level 5. That demonstrates just how clean this coffee was. And what's a little bit frustrating about that is it does make me wonder if we were able to give all of the substance coffees adequate rest, if they would also replicate those results as well, because this is one of the cleanest experiences we've had from any substance coffee, and it does help that it was void of any of the grainy characteristics to it, those hay-like qualities to it, those grassy characteristics, because it was just that clean right from the onset, and I feel like that definitely helped this one. So level 5, where we opted to put that, extremely rare we score many non-geisha coffees at a level 5. There's like maybe a couple of them a year, and we review hundreds and hundreds of coffees a year. Citrus fruit level 5, that's another one that is also very rare for any coffee we review. Very few score that for the citric characteristics, but this one had such an intense and well-defined lemon quality throughout the entirety of it. And while the floral qualities were a little bit more dominant on certain days, the citric characteristics were never absent at any point, especially the final time we brewed it. Very well defined too. So citrus fruit there at the level 4 mark, or level 5. Let's go through the level 4s. We'll start with the finished level 4. Very clean, very even finish, even with us pushing this coffee. So I think it's kind of interesting. We have enough to go back and brew this coffee one more time with Substance's recipe, and I'm curious to see if maybe that will balance it out a little bit more, if maybe the floral qualities will be a bit more pronounced. I was just so wowed by that day 70 impression where we did push this coffee that I was curious to see if maybe we could continue to replicate that. But honestly, I think all that happened was it heightened the citric characteristics as opposed to the floral characteristics from earlier. Sweetness level 4, it has great sweetness. And that is usually one of my bigger gripes when it comes to washed Ethiopian coffees, is that they can be lacking in that specific category. But the sweetness that comes from the fruit qualities and the floral qualities helps balance this coffee out, because it's a bit more sugary than I probably would have expected. So level 4, where we opted to put that. Acidity level 4, pretty bright. That's another thing that doesn't always score a level 4 in terms of washed Ethiopian coffees, but given that it's so citric forward and we push this coffee, I guess it's not too surprising that it scores there at that level 4 mark. Florality level 4. On certain days, I'm probably putting that to a level 5 with the cleanliness at a level 5, because you could have probably blindfolded me on that day 70 mark, and I want to say the day we brewed it with Substance's recipe on the V60, and I would have been deceived into thinking that it could be a Panamanian geisha. So that's just how good this coffee was on certain days, but at the end we settled on that level 4 because the final time we brewed it, it wasn't quite as floral as it had been on earlier days. A lot of softer white floral characteristics to it. Jasmine, definitely one that came to mind. Stone fruit level 4. I do believe on the earlier days we mentioned some apricot-like qualities to it, but I can see a little bit of a white peach given that there is plenty of these sugary stone fruit qualities to this one as well. So level 4 where we opted to put it, it does help that it has a very clean base. And then the final thing worth discussing, we have the body at a level 2, lighter bodied cup of coffee even when brewed with the V60. Still a washed Ethiopian coffee at the end of the day, so that's fully expected. Savoriness is kind of low because there was a lot of tea-like savoriness earlier, but I don't think it was enough to kind of contrast the rest of the more intense qualities of this coffee. So yeah, as I'm looking at this tasting wheel, I do think it's actually a pretty good representation of what I was getting from this coffee. All right, so my overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee. This one might be one of my favorite wash processed Ethiopian coffees this year. I'm going to go back to the idea that maybe we have been doing all of these substance coffees wrong, because starting this one at day 60 seemed to honestly be the way to go, because this coffee never had the kind of tricky period that we have with so many other really light profiled coffees. And for that reason, I don't want to say it's going to prompt us to change the way we review these substance coffees, because for anybody that doesn't know, the main purpose of the reviews is to start the coffees early and see the transition. There wasn't a lot of transition to this coffee. It started out really good and was good throughout. And I feel like if you're just somebody that's drinking coffee because you enjoy drinking coffee, then that's the purpose. You want to start the coffee at its best and you want to finish the coffee before it starts to tail off. But for us, we like to start the coffee before it reaches its best, so you can see how much the coffee changes from the point that we started it to the point where it is at its best. So we usually like to catch it on its upswing. But this coffee was already at its peak and it just seemed to improve very slightly from that point, but it's because of the adjustments we made. And that's the way a lot of people will usually go about drinking their coffee, but that's the way we like to do our reviews. And in this case, trying it out a different way seemed to work wonders for this coffee. I do feel like it probably performed better than it would have had we started it a lot earlier, but we're just really impressed by the way that this coffee turned out. I think I came up with the sentiment or idea before this that it has a Panamanian geisha taste with washed Ethiopian pricing. Type of person I would suggest this coffee to. This is a very good representation of a wash processed Ethiopian coffee in that ultralight profile, as it has so much cleanliness to it. I mean, level 5 for cleanliness is extremely rare for us. It has so many citric qualities, so many floral qualities, and it's very sweet, so none of that is sacrificed in any sense. Extremely well defined, pretty consistent, even some depth with some stone fruit characteristics as well. So a lot of the qualities you'd expect for a good wash processed Ethiopian coffee. So that's kind of the best direction I can point somebody towards on this one, and also the best way I can leave this review. If you by chance had an opportunity to try this coffee, I'd love to hear your thoughts and impressions of it as well. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. This right here has been a review of the Tabe Burka, wash processed Ethiopia from Substance Cafe. Thanks for watching.